Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Pete, we're back. Films and Stuff. A new day, a new week, a new episode.
That's right. How are you, Ethan?
Everything is great. I have to say, 2023 has been a little bit slow in terms of new content and compelling content, both in cinemas and on our myriad of streaming platforms. But you, like a white knight armed with passwords, came this week and you recommended something with such passion that I immediately watched it. And I have to say, after less than half an episode, I was in.
Yeah.
I was in. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, 2023. You want to take it away and introduce it?
You're very welcome. Absolutely. So today we're going to do a little bit, not too deep a dive into Netflix's latest program, Kaleidoscope.
Kaleidoscope.
So Kaleidoscope, for those who are not in the know, stars Giancarlo Esposito, who we all know from Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, The Mandalorian. I mean, he is really in the last, I think, 5-10 years come out as one of the most menacing and also one of the, I just say he's one of the better villains that we've seen on TV.
Oh yeah.
He's really, really good. So
have we seen him play a good guy?
Well, kind of in Kaleidoscope, right?
And this is the first time, right, that we've seen him be a good guy, right?
Maybe. I'm sure there are. Let's put it this way. I don't think he's famous for it. Let's put it that way. I think the roles that have really defined him as one of the best actors of this generation have been where he's played a villain.
Yeah. What a fun life, huh? Just to be a villain.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is he embraces that. What's really great is that he embraces that as well. So there's there's like these pictures and stories on Instagram and Twitter about how like someone came up to him and asked for a picture, and he took out a banana and said, "This is a gun," and then he holds it up to their head in a menacing way for the picture. You know what I mean? Like small things like that. Or where they were, the story was he was talking in an interview, he was talking about how I think he's got 2 or 3 daughters. And they were talking about the Mandalorian, where he obviously is a villain and he's kidnapped Grogu. Yeah. And in the group family chat, they said, "You better not do anything to that. You better not do anything to Baby Yoda." And he said, "Oh, trust me, when I get a chance, that little son of a bitch is going down." Right? So he plays up into that even with his family. So I think that's really nice. I think that's really great in that he doesn't take himself too seriously, but when he does, you're in for a bit of a ride.
Yeah. So anyway, he's the lead character in this.
He is the lead character. There is a strong supporting cast, although in fairness, I don't know many of them. Of course, Jai Courtney. Everyone knows Jai Courtney. He's in there as a one of the supporting cast, and I am ashamed to admit I didn't recognize many of the other actors.
I would say you recognize them, like Rufus Sewell.
Yeah. You're right. You know them by face, but maybe not by name.
Yes. You're like, oh, I know that guy. I have to say, I didn't recognize Jai Courtney right away because Jai Courtney seems to get bigger. I don't say this like fat. I mean, like he gets like
bulkier
ripped,
and stronger every series. Yeah. Every role I've seen him in.
He is huge. Like I just do not recognize him anymore from like the initial roles that I remember him from,
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a very, very solid cast. It's on Netflix. It's a heist movie, which is your,
My
it's more than
preferred
a passion,
genre or
right?
subgenre of thriller
Yeah,
slash drama is heist. I
yeah.
will watch a heist movie over a comedy, over a rom com, over an action, over anything. A well executed heist, I am 150% in on.
And this one is, I have to say, the world is not long for heist movies. There are a lot of heist movies or lot of heist shows, and the majority of them are pretty, like it's if you've watched a lot of film and TV, it's hard to come up with a strong heist plot, right? That like keeps you engaged. Kaleidoscope does it though.
Yeah, and we've buried the lead here a little bit, but Kaleidoscope is there's no easy way to say this, so I'm just going to go out and say it. It's a show that
Say
spans
it.
25 and a half years, let's say 26 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can watch the episodes in any order you'd like. In fact, it is recommended you don't watch it in order. And so on Netflix, the shows are not chronological. And I, in fact, don't think you should watch the show chronologically, although I'm sure there's an argument for it. But it's super, super, super interesting because every episode that way is kind of like a self contained episode. We know the overarching story is that there
Yeah.
is a heist in play, but we don't know any of
Yeah.
the players. We don't know what their roles are or what the ultimate effect, you know, what ultimately is going to happen to each of the players. And that's what I really liked about this show is that it deviated from that formula so strongly because, even to a certain extent, when you watched Ocean's 11, the first one, you were kind of like super impressed. You loved it. When you watched the second one, it wasn't that great, but you liked it as well because, again, it was a lot of fun. And, but by the third one, it lost its, let's say, or definitely by Ocean's 8, the Sandra Bullock led one.
Oof. Oof.
It lost a little bit of that
Don't get me
charm
started.
because we all
Yeah.
know that by the third act we are going to expect a subversion of some kind, right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't it wasn't unexpected. There was some twist in favor of the protagonists every third act. It was
Yeah.
amazing in Ocean's 11. It was so-so in Ocean's 12. It was well done in 13, but not surprising. And it was just not good in Ocean's 8 at all.
Yeah. I have to say, in a very crowded market, especially when you talk about heist and thriller type movies, the fact that they've got this wrinkle, I think is really important for them because
Yeah.
it would be hard to get excited about a series. If it was a heist movie, that's okay. But a heist series, I think would be really difficult because it's got to move a little bit slow
Oh, yeah.
and and every episode, I think, is just going to be, all right, we know you're getting prepared to rob the bank. We know that you need to get an armored truck. You're going to steal the armored truck. But then this happened. Like, I feel like you would lose so much interest in the run up to the actual heist itself, right? So I thought that this wrinkle, and I don't know if this was come up at the beginning or at the end of this show. Like, if it was, okay, Netflix was pitched it and they said, yeah, we've got a lot of those. We don't need another one. They said, oh, wait a second. We can switch it up by doing it this way. And then Netflix is like, that's brilliant, green light. Or if someone said, hey, we can do this. And Netflix is like, yeah, that's an amazing idea. Never thought of it like that, green light. But either way, it's really, really, I mean, it's not like mind blowing, right? I mean, they haven't like reinvented sliced bread, but it's really, really refreshing to watch a show in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very good twist on a genre that doesn't use the format as a twist. Because usually we expect twists, but not in terms of format. So, the most
Yeah.
recent mystery slash, it's not a heist movie per se, but the most recent mystery I can think of, or whodunit I can think of, is probably Glass Onion, and before that was Confess Fletch. And if you look at those mystery thriller movies, and they're closely aligned to heist movies. In both cases, they weren't stealing anything, but in terms of the format and the formula, they're very similar. You've got the
Yeah.
setup, you get introduced to all the different parties, and then, instead of a heist, you figure out the crime. And so while they were both very good, they were also both relatively formulaic, right? We understood we understood as viewers academically that Fletch was going to figure out who the murderer was, or actually probably already knew a few a few days into the movie, but then kind of kept his cards close to his chest, which is what you saw also definitely in Glass Onion. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think this was
So,
just a really, really nice way to change up the formula, and it harkens back a little bit to Memento,
oh, wow. Great reference.
right? So a movie where again everything was
Great
shot in
reference.
reverse, and in this case they took it one step further and said, "Hey, look, you watch this not in reverse, not in chronological order. You watch it in random order."
Having watched Kaleidoscope, you finished it, right?
I did, yeah.
Which character did you immediately fall for, and which character were you like, oh, I wish they would cut them out?
So Jai Courtney's character, I wanted him out.
Yep.
And I fell for the woman working at the security firm.
Yeah, the daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think about Juan Carlo? Like, do you like him in this role? Because he very much, and it's something I'm always fascinated by with actors, he really diminishes himself a little bit, you know? Like, you see him playing someone who's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. You see him not strong emotionally or physically, right? You see him in a lot of, like, you don't see him at his strongest and most virile in the show, right?
Yes and no, in the sense that Giancarlo Esposito has never really been, for me, has never really been a physically imposing actor in any way, shape, or form. He's very imposing and he's very intimidating, but I don't think of him as someone like, oh, I'm afraid he's going to punch me in the face. Even in The
Yeah,
Mandalorian, when he plays Moff Gideon, I think, right? I can't remember.
yeah,
He
yeah.
he has a very strong presence on screen, and he's a very intimidating presence, but it is not one of physicality. And so what was interesting about this show, which we saw a little bit of in The Mandalorian, when he has the darksaber fight with the Mandalorian, is it's a
Yep.
little bit weird because it's kind of like he's stepping out of a comfort zone. And I'm not saying that's his comfort zone, but maybe it's my comfort zone for him, which is I think of him as a scary guy because of his words, not because he's wielding a lightsaber, or not because he's punching a guy in the face or running through a vault, or, these kinds of things. So it's a bit, I understand what you're saying in terms of I don't agree that it diminishes him, but I think there's definitely cognitive dissonance for me when I see him in roles like this. Not that I don't want to see him in roles like this. I'm happy to see him. It's just it's a little bit weird to see him do anything physically exerting, because that is
Yeah.
not, when I think of him, that is not what I think of.
Who is You know who I originally thought? There's a dude named Peter Mark Kendall.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thought that guy, I thought he was the same guy. Tell me if I'm wrong, in Peacemaker. Not Peacemaker, The Boys. Am I wrong about that?
Are you confusing him with Randy Quaid?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean because
They look kind of alike, right?
not too dissimilar in terms of looks, but more importantly, I think in terms of role and in terms of
Yeah.
like sidekick persona, very similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I was really not clear. Like, is that the same guy from The Boys?
yeah, I can
And
see
I was
that.
like,
I
I
can
don't
I can
think
see where that
so.
confusion will come.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what did
But
so
I thought
look?
the
You said you've seen one episode fully or two
so I've
episodes?
seen no, I've seen up to Blue. So that gives me 4 episodes. There's
Okay.
8 or there's 10.
I again because they're not numbered.
There's
They're labeled
8.
by colors. I have
Yeah,
no
there's
idea.
8 episodes. So I've seen 4.
Okay,
But those 4 don't necessarily mean I've seen the first half. It just means that I've seen half of the episodes.
correct. And I
Right?
think that is a super valuable and super
Yeah.
important distinction you've just made. That's really
Yeah.
well said. Is that
Yeah.
you've watched half of the entire show? You've not watched half of the premise so far,
Right.
exactly because it's
Yeah.
not chronological. Exactly. So in those
And
four,
I thought 4 was a good way to stop. I mean, I almost binged them. I wouldn't say I did 4 in a row, but I did them probably over 2 days.
okay,
And I was really into it. If we wanted to poke holes, which is something we do, I could probably express a few frustrations with some plot elements.
sure,
I mean, it's always, and this maybe goes back to, like the Ocean series, which is they've got something that's impenetrable, but they break it down piece by piece and they find these highly unlikely ways, to bypass each element of this collectively impenetrable kind of system, right? And they all revolve a little bit on some luck, some skill, some cunning, some right. So I have to say I always have a little bit of mixed emotions on that. I really like when it's done, but it can occasionally go a little bit too far where I'm like, come on, like that wouldn't happen. But I generally like the heist idea. So after 4 episodes, I've got a good idea. I mean, it's very clear what the heist is going to be about. It's clear about who is, kind of going to be working together on it. And obviously there's a little bit of doubt in terms of who is on the up and up and who is, trying to undermine things, right? Like, I guess this is very similar to on our last Streamer Skip episode, I talked about the mole on Netflix, right? Who is the mole? Because I think that's what we're getting to here is that this team that's working together for the heist, there's, I think, at least one person who is not aligned with the vision. And you could make an argument, at least after 4 episodes, every single person has their justification for why they are pretending to be aligned with the overall scheme, but they're going to screw everybody over, undermine everybody, sell them out at the first opportunity because they've got something else in mind. And it's selfish reason, has nothing to do with what everyone else is doing.
right.
Am I on the right track for that?
You
Like that
are.
is a thing I've picked up, right?
You definitely are. You definitely are. I think the one thing I will say is the wind gets a little the because the show isn't chronological. the wind gets taken away from the sails a little bit because I think, I don't remember which episode it is, but like you see 6 months after the heist, or, at the very end, you see the end before the actual end.
Okay.
So when that happens, the rest of the episodes, how this entire story is going to end up. So it feels like sometimes it feels a bit anticlimactic, and in the other times you also be like, yeah, you do whatever you want. I know how your end is coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
it's
I mean, I was gonna say, like, this is the what do you call it? Not the totem. You always say like the thing that everyone is going after. What's it
the
called?
MacGuffin, yeah.
The MacGuffin in this case is bearer bonds, right? $7 billion of bearer bonds.
Yeah.
Right. And let's give a quick finance lesson. So we're like on the Wolf of Wall Street. A bearer bond is just a bond. It's not registered to anyone's name. And when you hold it physically, it's ownership, regardless of how you kind of got it. It's just assumed if you hold it, you own it. And then it gets a little bit fuzzy, right? Okay, that part is fine, right? I mean, first of all, we know that, I don't know in the world if there are any bearer bonds, right?
Well, I think they used to be a big
been
thing. I don't
replaced.
think they are anymore. But
I think they've all been replaced one way or another.
Yeah, it's too insecure and too prone for,
Correct.
Money laundering, basically.
Right. So once I've stolen these bearer bonds, let's just say I've got a suitcase full of them. What am I supposed to do with them? Like, I can't just go to a bank. They're not bearer bonds of Apple stock or Microsoft stock. They're of like what?
Well,
some other kind of wealthy dynasty family?
No, theoretically cash, right? So theoretically what you do is you go to a non-extradition country. And before I continue, Films and Stuff is not advocating for anything illegal. We are just assuming this is
we're just talking about a show.
Talking about a TV series. Yeah. That's it. So theoretically, you go to the Caymans or, some other non-extradition country around the world, open up a bank account and tell them, I've got $7 billion worth of bearer bonds. Here it is. Give me $7 billion in cash and they're yours.
Yeah, but I don't think it works like that, does it?
I'm pretty sure that's what it's supposed to be.
So I understand, like, for me, the bond has to, like, if I take these bearer bonds, right? And then in theory, I could just make up my own bearer bonds. I take them to Liechtenstein. I go to the State Bank of Liechtenstein. I'm really sorry, Liechtenstein. I'm really not trying to crap on you, but let's just say that's the country. I take them to the bank. I say, hey, I've got all these bearer bonds. Give me cash.
Yep.
Or I want to open a bank account, fund my bank account. They're going to say, what are these? These are just really, really old pieces of paper. And they say they have the value of $1 or whatever they say they have. I don't think the bank just gives you money. What's the bank supposed to do
because that's how you get the bonds in the first place, is you basically trade in money for these bonds, and the bonds are basically redeemable anywhere in perpetuity. That's how you issue the bonds, right? We're talking about how you cash them in, but how do you actually issue the bonds? The issue is I go to, again, we're not going to, I go to State Bank of Liechtenstein and say, okay, look, I've got $1 billion. Here's the cash. I'm going to give you the cash. You give me a single piece of paper that says that whoever owns this piece of paper has the right to take that $1 billion of cash. And if I give it to my brother, or if I give it to Ethan, or if I give it to my neighbor, and they come to you, they have to give you that bond, the money back.
Maybe, but I really don't think it works that way.
Look, I mean, I'm not
Do
speaking from
you?
experience. I have no idea myself, but I feel like that's the most logical thing to do.
Because I understood like the way let's also, oh man, this is turning into films and stuff finance edition, but there's a distinction between debt and equity, right? So
Yep.
I know that there's bearer shares. A bearer share means, hey, there's no share register. If you have this piece of paper, it entitles you to whatever, 1%, 25%, 100% of the company. Whoever holds this paper owns the company,
Yeah.
right? That's a bearer share, which are also not, I think, permitted anymore in almost all
Probably also
jurisdictions,
the same reason. Yeah.
but there may be some historically. Okay, let's say I've got the bearer share. Let's say I've got all 100% of it, right? The company still has to have some assets, right? Let's say it's a Swiss company and the Swiss company just whatever, it's not operating and it just owns like a vault of diamonds and cash. Then, if I know that the company has some assets, I can take it to a place where those assets are and I can say, hey, Swiss bank, see, I've got all these certificates. It shows I own 100% of the company and you are the custodian of all this company property. So ipso facto, I now own all of these diamonds and cash and so on and so forth, right?
Sure.
Okay. But if I don't know where to take these bearer shares, and one or two, the company doesn't have any assets, owning 100% of that company is essentially worthless, right?
But you just said the company has a ton of assets, right?
I mean, if that's the case, but if that's not the case, I mean, if you don't know where the assets are or there are no assets, just
Well, then
having,
the bearer shares are worthless.
right. But how do you know that if you're stealing shares?
Yeah. So I think they weren't stealing bearer shares, right? They said they were
They were stealing
stealing.
bearer bonds.
Yeah, exactly.
But a bond doesn't entitle you to assets of the company. It entitles you to some type of security that pays
No, yeah. So
a
I think
coupon.
you're thinking of bonds as a debt instrument,
You know,
which is what we know bonds in the traditional finance market today, right? So if a company issues a bond, that is basically the company borrowing against the company borrowing against the company's assets for a fixed coupon rate,
yeah,
which is the same as an interest rate,
right.
and then at the end of the term, they buy the bonds back by paying back the original debt amount. Right? So that's a traditional bond issue. That's what we think of today. But a bond is also a bond is being issued against the assets of the company. That's how they price the value of the bond and so forth. In this case, we're not talking about a company, we're just talking about a pile of cash. I've got $10 in my pocket. Okay? And I go to the bank and I say, all right, well, here's $10. I want you to issue me a piece of paper that says whoever holds this piece of paper is entitled to $10. Now, for $10, it
So
doesn't make
if
sense because $10 is a very fungible
yeah,
amount of money and it's a very small thing. Now, if you're sitting on
okay.
$7 billion of cash, that's a lot of physical cash, right? You can't physically move that around anywhere.
So does the bearer bond identify which bank this cash is at?
Theoretically, yeah, it'll tell you because it'll tell you who issued the bond and that the issuer is sitting on that asset for you.
So it actually specifies it. The bond itself specifies the bank where the assets are.
Yes, it should.
So it says State Bank of Liechtenstein, right? And
Hereby
you go say,
issues
okay,
$7 billion
yes,
of bonds and against $7 billion of cash that it
yeah,
is sitting on.
okay. So in theory, you have these bonds. They tell you which bank to go to. You take them to the bank. You plop them down. Say, hey, I've got these bonds. I want my cash,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
And you can
do
go to
you
any
really?
bank with that because that effectively becomes a tradable security because you can go because it is cash. it
Not
becomes
to get overly technical about it, but realistically, if I go to HSBC or Bank of America with these bonds, let's just say I've got $1 million. Let's not even do $1 million. Let's do $100,000, just because that's like a more non-money laundering amount, right?
Sure.
I just take $100,000 worth of bonds, right? I've got 100. They're each $1,000 denomination. I go to HSBC. Hey, I'd like this cash. Realistically, do you think that I'll get it?
So probably, and the question is, how did you get it? They would be able to ask you today, how did you get this bond?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say I was cleaning my mom's house. Let's say grandma. I'm cleaning my grandmother's house. She passed away. I found these in a box.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't think
that's kind of realistic.
And as long as they could probably verify that as being genuine, and as the bond is genuine, then of course they would give you the cash. Yeah.
So they're gonna ask for my passport copy or my driving license,
well, exactly.
right?
Which back in the day they never did, right? Back in the 70s, 60s, 80s, whatever. Money was money. They didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't ask any questions. No banks asked questions back in the day.
But can I assume? Let's just say again. I'm not trying to be pedantic about it, but just to understand why we're trying to get $7 billion in the show. If I take this to Bank of America, Chicago branch, right? They're going to say, hold on, we don't know anything about this. Keep it with us. We've got a record of you. We'll go talk to the bank and see if this is real, legitimate, or so forth. But we're not just going to give you $100,000 based on these unverified pieces of paper.
Well,
right?
absolutely. They would. Okay. That's exactly it. They would have to verify it.
They're going to go, God only knows how to do it, but they're going to go through their liaison. It'll take 8 months, and they'll go to
I don't even think it'll take 8 months. I mean, these days they have security numbers on the bond, so you can just type it into the system and be like, yes, okay, we verified internally through our Bloomberg machine that, this ISIN number was registered for this bond, and this bond was issued by the State Bank of Lithuania or Liechtenstein or whatever we were talking about. And so it's a genuine thing. So that's these days. Back in those days, it would probably even, you probably pick up the phone and say, hey, Bob, I've got Ethan here. He's got $7 billion of your bearer bonds. Are these genuine? This is the serial number. And they'll probably check it out and they'll be like, yep, it's genuine. All right, you can give him $7 billion and send me the bearer bonds. I'll transfer the 7 to you.
So that's the crux of this heist, is that there are allegedly $7 billion of bearer bonds.
Yeah, and it's based on a true story, by the way.
Yeah, what?
Based on a real thing, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, so the story itself is obviously not true, but the idea of this bearer bond heist is genuine. I think there was, I don't remember when, but certainly in our lifetimes, and I think even in our very recent lifetime, there was an instance where a bunch of bearer bonds that were issued in like the 60s and 70s were stolen from a bank or a vault or something at a heist. So the story is fictional, but the premise is genuine. Or true story.
Out of curiosity, if I've got $7 billion of bearer bonds just sitting in my vault, why am I not immediately going to the bank and transferring this to my bank account where it's more secure?
Tax purposes, or, you want to use that money for more nefarious things. Because if it's a bearer bond, if I want to buy, I don't know, something illegal from you, I don't need to give you a transfer of $7 billion in cash.
So I'm just, okay. So again, obviously this is a fictitious example, but if I'm a drug dealer, I'm basically buying my drugs in bearer bonds.
You could, yeah.
Right? Okay. So every day when I buy, the plane lands in my backyard, I go out there with 10 pieces of paper and I give them
instead
to
of
the pilot,
10 pallets of cash, you can just give them these 10 pieces of paper, and then that's it. Exactly.
Got it. And then Mr. Drug Lord has the same issue. where he's got to go to his bank or he's got to go to the branch himself. But basically,
But that's
it's
Mr. Druglord's
cryptocurrency
problem.
in another way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So that's why there are $7 billion worth of bear bonds. I'm just keeping them in a vault, right? Whenever I take an Uber trip, I'm tipping with a bond. Whenever, I need to buy something on the black market, I'm using pieces of paper like this. That's the reason why these have never been encashed, correct?
Yeah.
Even though it's dramatically risky and stupid and.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably why also we don't see bearer bonds anymore, is because it's, if heaven forbid there's a fire and that $7 billion of bonds disappear, you've destroyed that wealth.
Yeah.
Right. It's
just
the
out of
equivalent.
curiosity.
It's the equivalent of Bitcoin, and you buying Bitcoin, putting it into a hardware wallet, and then destroying the wallet.
So originally, right? I mean, the original is, or the origin of this is that this consortium got $7 billion from doing very bad things, right?
Yeah,
We don't know what that is, but they did bad things.
Exactly.
But so I've got 7 billion in cash, right? I still had to take it to the bank and give them the money and take the bonds, right?
Wait,
like to start the whole process. To start the whole process, I had to take my cash that I either stole or got through doing some criminal activity.
Right.
I had to take that to the bank, right? The State Bank of Liechtenstein, and say, here's all this money. Can you please give me bonds instead?
Yeah.
And that wasn't raising any issues? Like,
because
why is
that was done
less...
well in the past, right? That was done, I think even in the show, they were talking about how that was done well in the 60s and 70s before registration was required.
But if I said, hey, I just want to, here's all this cash, give me bonds, they're like, sure, no problem. If I said, hey, I want to open a bank account and deposit this cash, would they have done it? Or the issue was I didn't want people to know that I had the money.
No, it's probably, they could have easily, I'm sure the banks would have been very happy to do it.
So why would you take the risk of bearer bonds instead of just taking it in your bank account?
Because it's easy. It's an easy way of transferring money without physically transferring money.
So the reason they wanted the bonds is that they want to give this to other people.
Yeah, or maybe they received it from other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like it really would have been easier just to open a bank account in the 60s.
I think we both think that way because we are upstanding citizens and members of society who don't look at the potential for illegality and black market anything.
Yeah.
But, and we also come from modern times where we believe in things like, knowing your customer, anti-money laundering, not using money for bad things and illegal things. So that's fine. Anyway, so that was our tangent.
I'm sorry to get off on the finance tangent, but I think that really helps to put this in perspective because the amount is so big, and they make such a big to-do about how much volume of paper they're going to have. I just wanted to understand the reasonableness that this is, even a scheme that's worth undertaking. Yeah.
Look, I think what you said in the initial bit before we got into this tangent was absolutely right. The bonds are a MacGuffin, right? They are the object of desire that moves the plot forward. Mm-hmm. That's it. We don't. Yeah. They're not using. It's not that they're taking the money because they want to buy a jet and buy a company and do all these things. They just want the money for the sake of having the money. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that a lot of times these films get ahead of themselves by everyone wanting to steal the entire MacGuffin
100%.
Rather than just kind of
100%.
Peel off right?
Absolutely. And then they also, plots almost always get derailed also because there's inevitably that one person in the crew or that one couple in the crew that's going to, backstab everyone at the last possible minute and steal the whole thing for themselves. And that almost never works out for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ocean's 11 started this trend of kind of like this ragtag. I mean, that's not really the right word, but they all had like some
Specialization.
unique qualities,
Yeah.
you know? And you wouldn't actually think that any one of them is really the person that you'd want to trust or on that crew, but everybody somehow like pulled it together when it mattered. And they all had this one very, very, you know, highly specialized element of expertise that no one else in the world could replicate. So Danny Ocean was willing to put up with all their other like crazy antics because they needed this one thing, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas realistically, this is like kind of not how you would put together, you know, a qualified team, you know, if you were trying to mitigate risk and mitigate like the human element of these things.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that, and that's probably another, not fault, but downfall of these heist crews is that they always go for ability over personality.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, you know, we know that in any business as a manager, the personality and the management of the team actually is more important than the skill level of the individuals for most functions.
Right.
And because you can teach skills, but you can't teach personality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and that ultimately is always the downfall. Now, of course, we're comparing this to Ocean's 11. Ocean's 11, the advantage was that everyone was on the same page and everyone had a good personality because they all had a respect and they all had a hierarchical structure to say, hey, look, at the end of the day, Danny and Brad Pitt's character are the boss. Everybody else is subordinate. Right. You come to them if there's an issue and they'll sort it out for you. So even though there's specializations here, even though Giancarlo is supposed to be the boss, like he gets undermined by the team constantly for silly things, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
so what do you give this? What do you give this show? What's your rating of this show?
So
is this must subscribe?
It was when I first watched it. Instantly, my instant reaction was to give it a mooch. But the longer I've watched it, or the longer I've thought about it, the more I've thought about it. Actually, I elevated it to a must subscribe. One, it's a good heist movie. I say movie, but really it's a good heist show. Two, I love the fact that the premise is that it takes place over 25, 26 years, something we haven't seen before. And three, I love that it's not chronological. I love that you don't have to watch it chronologically.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 4 episodes in. I mean, for me, absolutely, this is a mooch. I mean, I really like to be honest about these things. Or not honest, that's you know what I'm saying. I want to be really clear on these things.
Yeah.
If I didn't have Netflix anymore and they said, hey, how much is Netflix? $9.99 a month. They're like, do you want to sign up again so you can watch these last 4 episodes? I could live without it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that I would do that just to watch these last 4 episodes. Be like, oh yeah, I saw that show. It was good. Like, I didn't watch the end of it, but like, I kind of like saw where it was going. And that to me, I think is, whereas House of the Dragon, you know, just to kind of like put it in context, if I would have had 2 episodes left and HBO would say, hey, you got to like re-up for another year, I would have paid for another year. To me, that's the distinction of a must subscribe. I'm not doing that yet for Kaleidoscope. It's possible that I do after 2 more episodes. But after 4 episodes halfway through, I'm not ready to make that financial commitment if I had to, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I understand that. And I think that in a show like Kaleidoscope, because it's not chronological, it's harder to give it a score halfway through or even 2 episodes in because you don't know what you're seeing or what part of the show you're actually in. So it's
it's not to minimize the show because there's great shows out there, and I do subscribe to Netflix, and I would absolutely watch this whole show. I mean, I think that's stronger than a lot of other recommendations I've given. I'm just saying that if you've got money and you've got to choose which platform you want, and the only thing that you're interested in on Netflix is Kaleidoscope, I don't think it's worth doing that if there's other platforms out there that you've got a bunch of other stuff that you'd rather watch, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And spoiler alert, tune in the next couple of weeks. We will be going through our annual results so that we can give you our score.
Not
to tell
easy.
You.
Not easy.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. But it'll give you an opportunity to understand which platform we believe provides the most value or bang for your buck, at least in 2022. And, you know, we'll caveat it then, but I'll caveat it now as well. Past performance doesn't indicate necessarily future performance, but it's the best we've got. So that's what we're going to go with.
Yeah. I mean, in any case, I'm really grateful that you introduced me to Kaleidoscope. I think if nothing else, it's an absolute gem. It's a great diamond in the rough. It should be watched. If you have Netflix, if there was another rating, you know, scale, and it was you have Netflix, should you watch this? To me, the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think inherently that's the way our ratings work, is that if you don't have the platform, if it's worth mooching, you should mooch it. But if you do have the platform and it's considered worth mooching, that means you should watch it.
Right. Okay. Do we have anything more to say about this, or?
No, I think that's it. It's a mini series. I don't expect to see a season 2 because the story ends quite nicely in terms of you know, it doesn't. I don't think there's more for it to say. I think it's a must subscribe at this stage. It's a mooch from Ethan, but again, our caveat is that it's hard. This is one of the few shows where you should watch the entire series before you make a judgment call. And in fact, that's exactly what happened to me. I made a judgment call. I thought it was a mooch. And then, you know, a week after I finished it, I moved it up to a must subscribe.
It's hard. I agree. It's hard. Okay, Pete, appreciate everything today, including introducing me to Kaleidoscope. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Next week, it's going to be so cool. We've got a special guest. We're going to go through our year-end ratings. We've got more stream or skip as well.
That's right. We're going to probably be discussing, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but we're probably going to be discussing Avatar 2.
Avatar.
So get ready. If you haven't watched it, go out in the cinema, watch it. That's not our review. I'm just saying in preparation, go out and watch it, and we'll discuss it and we'll review it with our special guest.
We'll be here. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. Pete, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Everyone, please remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment below the video. If you want to tweet at us at F&S Podcast, or if you want to leave us a message on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast, or if you want to go old school and email us, aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com.
Old school. Thanks for putting it out there, Pete.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.